Hey, what's up, guys? It's me, Justin. If we haven't met yet, I'm the student pastor here at Cedarcrest. And maybe you're wondering, why is this guy wearing pink shoes? Or why is he up there and not in here? And maybe the best question we should tackle first is, who is this little being in his arms? Well, Cedarcrest, I'd like to introduce you to our daughter. This is Britta Brooke Brecken. And now I didn't really do anything in this process, but Cherith, she did all the work, and on Friday night at 10:54, our little girl was born. And so here she is. And today I actually want to talk to you about this idea of redo with her, as long as she lets me. 2 weeks ago, we talked about how we can experience a redo with God. And we said that God is just one step away, that we can take that step towards Him and experience a redo with our relationship. Last week, we talked about how if we want to experience a redo with ourselves, a redo with you, well, we need to break the patterns and the cycle of addiction. And that addiction isn't just drugs or alcohol. It's anything that we turn to try to avoid the feelings or the experiences that are bringing up these negative emotions. Well, today, with this pretty little girl, I want to talk to you about how we can have a redo with us. Because I actually think if we can get this right, if we can nail down the redo with us, we're going to see the change in our community that we've been looking for. It starts with who we hang out with. When I was in college, I was a good kid. I didn't really break the rules. I didn't do anything that I wasn't supposed to. I was a rule follower, but I didn't always hang around other rule followers. In fact, my freshman year, I remember I was at a party. What's your arm doing in there? Yeah, there you go. There you go. I was at a party, and I was drinking apple juice. I promise, it was just apple juice. But my friends weren't. And one thing led to another, a fight broke out. And this fight got so big that the cops were called. And as the cops showed up, someone yelled, "Run." I had done nothing wrong. I wasn't in the fight. I wasn't drinking anything that I wasn't supposed to, but I ran because of the influence of the people around me. Maybe you've heard this said before, but you become the average of your 5 closest friends. You become the average of the 5 closest people to you. And I don't just mean people that are physically close to you. It could be the people that are relationally close, the ones that you're following on Instagram, the ones that you're listening to, the ones that you're giving your best to. And maybe you're sitting back right now going, "Justin, that's cool. I've never run from the cops." Maybe you have. But maybe you've, I don't know, told a bit of an exaggeration to your parents about what you and your friends were going to do. Or maybe you had that finsta because if mom and dad knew what you were really doing with those people, well then, they wouldn't be too happy. Or maybe, you're hanging around a group of people and you just are telling mom and dad one thing, but doing another. Or maybe you're just pretending to be all kinds of things around all kinds of people. I don't know what it is for you, but I know that we can get ourselves caught up with all the wrong people and find ourselves doing all the wrong things. Maybe you're just hanging around people who just don't love Jesus. And so while they're not encouraging you to do like horrible things, they're not encouraging you to press into your relationship with God. They're telling you just do you, your truth, your thing. It'll all be okay. Well, when we experience that, we begin to experience this breakdown relationally. Because if it's not true for you, then it can't be true for me. But we convince ourselves, oh, it's fine. Or we say things like, I can be this way here and that way there. I can do this with them and that with those guys. And, everything's going to be fine. But I think that's where we actually can deceive ourselves. Maybe you're sitting back and you're saying, Justin, I don't need to worry about a redo with us because I don't have an us. Okay. I think in order for us to experience a redo in our community, it starts with us looking at who are the people we're spending the most amount of time with. In Genesis 1, we see one of the two creation stories. Same story, just told with different details. And in Genesis 1, verse 26 and 27, it says this, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky." But notice it says, our image. You see, you and I were made to be in relationship and community with others, because in the very beginning, when there was nothing, there was still the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. How that works out, I don't really know. But that's a conversation for another day. But here's what I want you to see. In Genesis 2, when we see a little bit different details in that creation story, God looks out and at his entire creation, he says everything is good except for he noticed that the first person was all by themselves, alone. And God says this, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a suitable helper," and a suitable, I haven't slept a lot, so forgive me, but that helper wasn't like a sidekick. It wasn't like Robin to Batman. It was like a co-laborer. It was someone to hold you up when you can't stand, and for you to hold up when they can't stand. It's to do life together, equally yoked. So that was God's design from the very beginning. Maybe you've heard of a guy named Solomon. Solomon was the wisest man to ever live outside of Jesus. And he was living right smack dab in the middle of the Old Testament. That's the first half of the Bible. It's all about life before Jesus was born. And there's this pattern that you see in the Old Testament. God's people, they're in right relationship with God. They're like tight like shoelaces. But then for whatever reason, they take their eyes off God. They elevate themselves over God. And as a result, they find themselves in trouble. Oftentimes it would be captured by their enemies. So then God's people would cry out, "God, help us." God would hear their cries. He would provide for them. They would turn from their ways and they would be back close with God again. And then it would just repeat. Well, Solomon, he was a really good king, but he wasn't always faithful to following God. In fact, in 1 Kings 11, verse 1, it starts off by saying this, "King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, the Moabites, the Amorites, the Edomites, the Sodomite, and the Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, 'You may not intermarry with them because they will surely turn your heart after their gods.'" See, right here, God, he initiates this principle of you become just like your 5 closest friends, those that influence you. And sure enough, Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, he goes on and he allows himself to be influenced by the wives he had. And again, that's a conversation for another day, because multiple wives, that's just weird. But anyway, he allows the closest people to him to take his eyes off of God and to put it on other things. And as a result, he continues the cycle of God's people throughout the Old Testament. So maybe you're sitting back going, okay, if the wisest man outside of Jesus couldn't demonstrate what we're supposed to do and how we can live in right relationship with others, how we can experience a redo with us, then who can? Well, Jesus. Jesus is the example that we should strive to follow. In fact, Jesus is the example I want my little girl to follow. Jesus is the example that I want my son to follow. Jesus is the example that I try to follow. And so listen to what Jesus says in Matthew 22, verse 37. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. He goes and say, and love your neighbor as yourself. Later on, Jesus would go on to identify that your neighbor is basically anybody. Anybody you come in contact with, anyone that you may not come in contact with, anyone that you might come in contact with, that is your neighbor. But even Jesus demonstrates that while you are to love everyone equally, you don't have to allow everyone to have the same influence in your life. Let's just take a look at what Jesus did. Right, his final 3 years on this earth, he did a lot of speaking, a lot of teaching, a lot of relationship stuff. And here's the thing. Oftentimes, there would be what we call the masses. Hundreds, if not thousands of people would gather to listen. But then Jesus broke it down more, and there were the 72. These 72 were people that probably followed Jesus pretty closely. They were around every time that Jesus spoke. But then there was the 12. And these are the guys that Jesus said, hey, come follow me, come do life with me. People that Jesus hand selected, and they weren't all like him. Actually, none of them were like him because he's perfect and he's God's son. But in his group, he had, one guy who worked for the government. And he had one guy who hated the government. He had the popular people, and he had the no-names, all mixed up together. But then from the 12, he actually had 3 more. And these would be the ones that Jesus, he would bring to the most intimate moments. The night that Jesus was arrested, he didn't bring all 12 of his disciples with him to the garden to pray with him. He brought 3. But then if you read the book of John, you can see that John sometimes refers to himself as the one that Jesus loved. So Jesus had the masses and the 72. He had the 12, he had the 3, and he had the 1. And I think if we can approach our relationships that way, we're going to see that there are going to be people who we're going to interact with who probably shouldn't have much influence on us. And we're going to have people who are going to have a little bit of influence, a little bit more, and a whole lot more. It's kind of like you have your best friend, you have your friend, you have your acquaintance, and you have the strangers. Notice there's no enemy there. Because Jesus says, love your enemy. So how are we going to do that this year? How are we going to live out this redo with us? Well, starting in September, we're going to launch life groups. And the way we're doing life groups this year is going to look a little bit different. And the reason it's going to look a little bit different is because, well, our world looks a little bit different. And so here's how we're going to do this. Once a month, we're going to gather together. Everybody, bring your friends, bring your family, bring everyone you can. Sunday night, 4:30. And we're going to have an incredible night together. We're going to worship. We're going to hear from probably me, and so the teaching might be okay. But we're going to have a blast and celebrate what God has done and what God is doing. But then the other 3 or 4 Sundays of the month, we're going to gather together in coffee shops and houses around the community in intentional life groups. And groups will roughly be 8 students to 1 leader. And it might be less, and it may be a little bit more, but that's a case-by-case basis. And it's there we're going to live out what Jesus demonstrated. Doing life with people where we can have intimate conversations about what's really going on. And how can we take what we're studying together and apply it to our lives? How can we share the ups and the downs, the good and the bads? Because we all need people that we allow influence on in our lives. And we all want to influence others. Sometimes we just don't get it right. So, here's my challenge. My challenge for you is simply this. Who is your group? Tonight, if you head over to our Instagram account, in the link in the bio, you're going to see an opportunity to sign up for a group. There'll be a picture of the leader, a little bit of info about who they are, click on the link, sign up for the group, define your group. But then I want you to press in a little bit. Who are the people that you hang around with that maybe need more influence in your life? Who do you need to let in? And who are the people that maybe need to be moved to further influence? Maybe shouldn't have the influence that you're allowing them. Because here's the thing, whether you realize it or not, you guys are all examples. And one day, this beautiful little girl in my arms is going to look to you to figure out, how do I do relationships? And I don't know about you guys, but I want her to get it right, because I know I didn't. So let's press into our community. Let's see her redo with us, and let's see what God does. Peace.